the recording has started. So again, what is needed to get a real full appreciation of this story is once you finish it, and that's why I keep emphasizing the need to get to that end, and ideally, then to go back and at least read certain sections, or go back and listen to the videos that are posted, and look at the PowerPoint again, and to see how things evolve, and to see certain connections that were perhaps not as prevalent when you first read it, mainly because you don't know what's going to happen. And we're going to look at a couple of those today that I think are really relevant. So again, before I pull up the PowerPoint, I want to start with the PowerPoint again, and before we go to the text, any other observations? Is this easier than Billy Budd?
For sure. Bonjour. Good morning. Yes, easier than Billy Budd, for sure.
Okay, easier than Billy Budd, easier than the Metamorphosis?
And shorter than even the
Metamorphosis, yeah, it is. I mean, it is. I mean, what we read before, certainly Billy Budd is considered a novella, that space between a short story and a novel. And Metamorphosis is pretty much the same. I mean, it's much longer. You'll see, and that's why it's going to be, I'm very curious to see how you all react to Araby, which is so much shorter. But I know you've had experience with short stories in previous English classes, 101 and 102.
Yeah.
And I think you'll probably, some of you will like the idea that it's short, because the advantage, one of the great advantages of a short story like Araby is you can read it in one sitting. Now, I would argue that The Dead can be read in one sitting, a longer sitting. Same with the Metamorphosis. Billy Budd might be pushing it a bit. But it is important always to remember, and I think we talked about this, and this is more so for the future now, I suppose, when you're reading other stories or novels, is it's very important to pick a good time to pause, right? Remember, I pointed out in The Dead, we have 3 sections. So ideally, and with Billy Budd, it was clear, there were different chapters. You really don't want to pause and stop reading for the night in the middle of a chapter, because then it's hard to, I mean, the chapter distinctions, or in case of The Dead, these 3 parts signify a pause. It's almost like it's saying, okay, I know you need a break, here, take a break. All right, and it tells us that by the way it's presented on the page. We saw the same thing in Metamorphosis. It allows for a greater comprehension of what's, and a easier means by which to remember what you've been reading. And that's, of course, one of the keys when you read over a period of time. By the time you get to the end, how fresh in your mind is what you were reading a week or 2 earlier at the beginning. That's why ideally you read it a second time. All right, and I will encourage you, especially when you're preparing for the final exam, to reread it in its entirety, and ideally in one sitting.
It works only if you reread. Yeah, because if you read once, it's not enough. You need to read more. Yeah, that's true. For sure.
Well, this is very much. I mean, it's like with a great movie, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but when I see a movie I really, really like, I want to see it again. And I've been known to, go the very next day to the theater and watch the same movie I saw the day before, if it really impacts me, because I want to remind me, what did I miss? And certain movies, because I think you've gathered, I love movies. Certain movies I've seen 10, 20 times. And every time I see it, it's to some degree a new experience. Same with these, what we're studying here. I mean, I've read The Dead, I don't know how many times. I've read Billy Budd not as many times, but you know, probably 3 or 4 times at least. And I've read the Metamorphosis many times. And every time I enjoy it because I'm seeing new things, even being as familiar with it as I am. So in terms, if it is your first experience with these texts, the second time can really be enlightening. So I really, and what's nice about it, when you come to it a second time, especially if you're attending these classes, you're taking notes, you're looking at the videos, you have the PowerPoints, when you go back and reread it, you're looking for certain things. And and not just finding them, but then making connections. And with someone like Joyce, and most great literature, but Joyce is Joyce and Shakespeare, I would argue, are probably the best at it. Everything is connected. Everything is there for a reason. And it's tough sometimes to recognize that. And it's a matter of just doing it as often as you can to be able to absorb it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back and just refamiliarize ourselves a bit from the PowerPoint and start looking, because we didn't look at the later themes that are in this PowerPoint, right? So just a reminder, right? This is the second PowerPoint that I posted. This is dealing with themes. We looked at this jealousy and ego, mainly, obviously, as it relates to Gabriel. Okay, it speaks a lot about his personality, and it's very important to recognize these traits, these characteristics of his personality, in order for what happens at the end to have a greater impact, the impact that it's meant to have. It can only resonate if we are familiar with these characteristics of Gabriel that lead towards that ending when he's alone with Greta. Okay, and it builds, right? When we first meet him, we don't know anything about him, right? We get a little bit from what other people are saying, and of course that's the way that we can analyze who he is and what his characteristics and personality are, is by what he does, and how he interacts with others, and also how others view him, right? That gives us a fuller picture, right? What perspective are we seeing? And we've talked, again, just to review a little bit, we talked a lot about his need for validation, right? Which is an example of his insecurities. He seems to come across on the surface, and he is very much concerned with surface appearances. And of course, the story is talking about that and trying to demonstrate how the surface really doesn't reveal the reality. And he is very much concerned with how he appears and how he is perceived by others, while always maintaining this dual, somewhat paradoxical attitude that suggests that he believes himself to be superior to those around him, more aware, more educated, more understanding of the continent, and that Ireland is not a cultural place, and the people I'm here aren't going to understand my speech. If I bring up a poem by Browning, it's going to be way over their heads, and so on. So there is this obnoxious elitism to him, but it's undercut and fused with, and which is often the case with human beings, with an insecurity. That's why he's so defensive, right? It's something we recognize in our everyday lives. People who get very defensive about things is often reveals that they aren't as secure with it as they want others to think they are, or not as secure with it as they may believe they are. Okay, and we certainly see that with Gabriel. And we get that from the way he's interacting with others and how they respond to him. And then when we see his actions and sometimes his inner thinking, that lends itself to this idea that he's not secure. And you want to look for those little clues that demonstrate this, that he has superficial designs in terms of his understanding of himself, but that allows him to elevate himself disproportionately to the reality of what he is in relation to others. I mean, it's very much tied into the ending in his epiphany, when he starts recognizing the universality, if you will, of existence. That, you know, there's a connection, that everyone, the snow falls on everyone. Okay, and it makes no distinction about whatever your education is, where you come from, where you go for holidays, whether you read Robert Browning's poetry or not. It's the same snow that falls on everyone. There are no distinctions on that level. And it's a more profound level. Okay, it's a level that's also tied in with nature. And of course, the theme of death is part of the natural process of existence. Right? Death is a part of nature. And that's the unifying, if you will, aspect of life, right? That death is, everyone is going to experience it, no matter what you look like, no matter where you come from, etc. So it puts things in perspective, a perspective that allows for a greater self-awareness, and a perspective that allows for a recognition of the ego, and then perhaps a tempering of that ego. Right? And that's, again, a big part of what Gabriel goes through, because he is very egotistic. He is, as we mentioned, right? Let me get this up. Slow. Right? He is so self-absorbed. All right. And again, just reminding you want to remember the encounter with Lily right at the beginning, how he reacts when things don't go his way, when he is not in control, when he doesn't understand. And he can't understand because he doesn't have an ability to empathize with others. Right? He can't begin to respond to Lily in any way other than he does, because he doesn't care about what Lily has gone through. He can only see her behavior as an affront to him and how he sees himself within this society. Right? It comes back again. It's a little, and there's a progression, right? We looked at this last week, but let's just elaborate a little bit. You know, his encounter with Lily versus his encounter with Miss Ivers. First thing we have to notice is that what is Lily's status in this society, and what is Miss Ivers' status in this society? Mm-hmm. And so he's very dismissive of Lily. He feels he can do that because what is she in this society? Mm-hmm. She's beneath his status, right? In his mind, and in the mind of the society as a whole. She's a servant. Okay, she's maybe a bit more involved with the family, but nonetheless, she can be dismissed with a coin, with a tip. Of course, he can't do that with Miss Ivers, because Miss Ivers is his equal, right? And that's emphasized. They're both teachers, they're both university educated, and so on. So that becomes even more difficult for him, because he cannot extract himself from that with a flip of a coin. right? And that's why it impacts him more profoundly. And of course, the subject matter of his encounter with Miss Ivers is more profound. It's political, right? With Lily, it's really not about political. It's about relationships for the most part. Lily's attitude towards men, and the suggestion that she had, a bad relationship and so on, and it doesn't have any direct impact on Gabriel, but he takes it as such, right? This is, again, his self-absorption, that it always has to be about him. With Miss Ivers, it gets much more expansive insofar that it is about Gabriel. But of course, it's about much more. It's about Irish nationalism. It's about the state of affairs in Ireland at the time vis-a-vis what is Ireland culturally, politically, sociologically, right? And again, it comes back to what I discussed previously in terms of Charles Parnell and the movement towards independence against England that now has no leadership and has no real drive and purpose that it had had just shortly before. And that leaves people into the society, as represented by this Christmas party, of a state of inaction, inertia, passivity, routine, right? There's a lot of emphasis on the passive, routine, mundane, repeating of the same things over and over again. Think about the story about the horse, right? The mill horse that just circles around and around to turn the crank, right? To keep the machine moving, right? That image of just walking around and around and around and around. In the story, when he takes the horse out for a walk, and the horse sees a statue and just automatically goes into this same routine. Okay, and that's suggesting, in the context of this story, that the people at the party are doing something similar. It's just the same things over and over again. All right, there's no passion, there's no purpose, other than just to keep the same cogs in the wheel going around and round and round. All right, and that's very much a commentary that runs throughout all the stories in Dubliners about this passive nature of the society at the time. Again, how he does not recognize how his reactions impact the women. This comes again to what we discussed before in terms of the women and the theme of women and society here, the status of women and what their place is, and especially for someone like Gabriel, who is very much about, because of his ego, about being in control. And everything revolves around him, and if he doesn't have control, he runs away for the most part, or tries to. He has more difficulty running away from Miss Ivers, but of course has no problem running away from Lily. So the theme of death, right? That's the one we really haven't touched on. Right? We talked about the nostalgia, right? And that it does tie in with the theme of death. Everything, because remember the title of the story, The Dead. So everything really comes around to this theme of death. The nostalgia is very much related to how people view the past. And we touched on that, and perhaps we'll spend a little bit here, a little more time looking at this by looking at the text as well. Right, the characters often find themselves, this is a key, right? This term, this being paralyzed and unable to take control over their lives. and it may be a bit of a misnomer that they're unable as much as they're unwilling, all right? Due to the distraction from the present by their overpowering nostalgic feelings of the past, right? They're always talking about how things were. And of course, when they're looking at it, where the nostalgia comes in is they're only looking, for the most part, at what was good, right? Memory is like that. When we reflect on the past, I mean, sometimes we may be reflecting on negative things in the past, but the way that they're reflecting on the past here in this story is basically ignoring the negatives and trying to focus in on the positive. That's where nostalgia comes, because then they have a longing for that. I mean, I get very nostalgic for, the time I was in high school, all right? And I'm a bit older than, you guys, but, when I think about high school, I think about, oh, that was great. I had no responsibilities. I played football, basketball, and baseball, and we had fun. We went to parties. We went on dates, and not a care in the world. Wow, God, that was a great time. But of course, the reality is, when I reflect like that, thinking about it, I'm being nostalgic for it, how I cherry pick what I remember, and it makes it look like it was a great time. But I reflect enough to remember. Yeah, I had a lot, as everyone does in high school, going through puberty and everything else. It was not that easy. It wasn't like the way that I reflect about it. There was a lot more to it, and a lot of it was negative and difficult and painful. All right, but we tend to get nostalgic for those things in the past, and that kind of helps us manage and navigate through the present. Okay. As it says here, remembering the good and forgetting the bad. An idealization of the past, okay, where you're making the past, it's not about what was the reality of the past. You now bring it into the world of idealized, what I want it to be. And I'm able to cherry pick enough of the things that happened in the past by putting them together and ignoring the negative. It becomes an ideal vision of the past. And that, in terms of getting closer to the theme of the dead, is what is in the past. Well, a lot of what they discuss in the story about the past are people who are no longer alive. And it becomes the idealization of the past, becomes an idealization of the dead who are part of the past. Okay? And one of the issues here, and why we're looking at this in this kind of detail, is in these first two episodes of the story, the way that they reflect and engage with the past vis-a-vis the present involves a separation. All right, the past was the past, and this is the present. All right, it's not that there's a barrier between the two, but there's a distinction between the two. And that's important to remember when we get to the end, because the suggestion by Gabriel's epiphany and realization is the snow, is falling on the graves as well, falling on the monuments representing the past as well, as it is falling on the present. And that suggests in a manner that those distinctions between the past and the present really are not that distinct, right? In the big scheme of things, there is that universal aspect that it's all one. Okay. I know this is can be a little complex, but think about it, especially when you're reading the ending again, and ideally reading the whole story again. Okay, and so this is what I want to look at is, I don't know if you can see that, is particularly, we see so much of this in the speech, right? When he talks about cherishing the memory of the good old days, okay? And keep in mind that, you know, those good old days, like the gathering of at the dinner, I mean, this is a routine, the dinner, that happens every year, all right? But
I don't think so, that Derek, because he said that the last time he saw Lily, it was when she was little. I think so.
yeah, no, he mentions that. It's a good point. But there's other instances here where this gathering, right, this Christmas party,
Mm-hmm.
is an annual event. So it
No,
happens,
okay, okay. I didn't realize.
but no, but it's a good point because that could be a reflection that the change in Lily, right, because he hasn't seen her in a year.
Mm-hmm.
So remember her age is she's just now finished school. So she's about 17, 18. And
Mm-hmm.
when he saw her previously, she was 16, say.
Mm-hmm.
So just that 1 year can bring quite a bit of change, especially in someone that young. But it's
Mm-hmm.
also, the change is probably not nearly as pronounced as Gabriel suggests, but in his mind, it's almost as if he wasn't paying attention the previous year
Oh, okay,
because
okay,
Lily is
okay.
not that important,
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay,
okay?
I see the point.
But it's important to remember that this party is an annual event, right? He looks forward to being asked to carve at the table and so on. And that fits in with that theme of repetition, all right? And think of, again, the horse going round and round. It's also significant that it is round and round, which is suggestive of
In
uh,
circle. It's
a,
going in circle, like.
a circle like a year, right? We go around, we start Christmas, we go around, we're
Okay,
back at
okay.
Christmas and around and back at Christmas and around, back in Christmas, okay? So it's the repetition, which is, again, a continued demonstration of this idea of paralysis, that things
Oh,
aren't changing, that
uh-huh.
it's
So
just
it's a routine,
routine.
like a routine. Uh-huh.
Exactly, okay?
I think in one of your presentations you mentioned her mother, Gabriel's mother, I
Yeah.
think.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't read about his mother in any part, or I maybe I did I wasn't that
Yeah, well,
I didn't pay attention.
let's go find, let's use that out. Let's look at his mother and his speech, okay? Just so we're, let's get out of there. Stop that. Okay. Pull this down. So I had it here, so let me go find the reference to the mother. I think it was before the speech. So this is the speech here. We'll come back to that. I wish,
And which page is that?
that's the problem. I couldn't get
Ah,
exactly,
okay, okay, okay. So let me look for that part.
yeah. When we see the mention of his mother is when he sees the pictures. Remember, he sees the picture of Romeo and Juliet. Yes, this is one of the problems with doing it this way as well. Hold on, bear with me, everyone. Let's find it, because that'll allow. If anyone, if you're looking through your book, if you find the reference to the mother or the reference to the pictures on the wall, is it? I'm trying to remember if it's in the here. Okay, here it is. Okay, so it would be right at the end of the first section. No, the beginning of the second section. Hold on, let me get my book and find it for you. Hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, hold on. So it's on page 201.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So if we look up here, right, on page 201, Gabriel's eyes, right? Irritated by the floor, which glittered with beeswax under the heavy chandelier, wandered to the wall above the piano.
A picture of the balcony.
Right. So there's a picture of the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet. All right. What is Romeo and Juliet? Right. It's a Shakespeare play.
Shakespeare, yeah.
Okay. And it's the famous love story. Romeo and Juliet are star-crossed lovers. They come from different families and different backgrounds. It's tragic. Okay. It's a tragic love story of Shakespeare. It does a bit foreshadow, because it involves death, right? Romeo and Juliet. Romeo, they die at the end. And of course, it's foreshadowing then the story that Greta is going to reveal towards the end, because that's young, right? Romeo and Juliet were very young, 17, 16. The Greta's story with Michael takes place when Michael was 17. Presumably Greta was 17 as well. So this is a bit of foreshadowing to, again, we can't pick up on until we read the end of this kind of story, this kind of love story, this tragic martyrdom type of love story, where the love is so strong they're willing to sacrifice everything. Right? Remember, she says at the end, "I think he died for me." Right? And in Romeo and Juliet, it's very much in the same vein. Okay. Here is where he mentions his mother.
Yeah.
Okay?
I see.
So, and it is important because he has, his mother is dead. So he's having the same reaction to his mother in terms of nostalgia. And again, where we're looking at the past. And of course, we're looking at the theme of death here. Okay. Right, so it was she who chose the names of her son. Okay. So thanks to her, his mother, okay, Constantine, which is his brother, was now a senior curate at the Balbrigan. And thanks to her, his mother, Gabriel himself had taken his degree at Royal University. So the mother is being praised here as having been a good influence on her children. But note right afterwards, a shadow passed over his face. He remembered her sullen opposition to his marriage. Right? His mother was against his marriage to Greta. Some slighting phrases she had used still rankled in his memory. She had once spoken of Greta as being, this is key here, country cute. Remember the encounter with Miss Ivers, right? Where she invites Gabriel to go west, to the west of Ireland, right? To the country, right? It's countryside. It's outside of the city of Dublin. It's to the west. Ireland's not that big. And the mother, referencing Greta as country cute, okay, links to Gabriel's reaction to Miss Ivers when Miss Ivers says, "Why don't you bring Greta? Isn't she from that part of the country?" Okay, so like, this is what, I'm glad you brought up, because it's one of the things where you see these connections. So we get here, and you can see how it connects. When she's asking, "You'll come to the excursion to the Aran Islands this summer," which is the country. Everyone's going to be there, and it would be splendid for Greta too if she'd come. Right? She's from Connacht, isn't she? Which is the countryside. And Gabriel gets somewhat angry at the suggestion that his wife, Greta, is from the country, the countryside. And he goes, her people are, suggesting, well, her people are, but she really isn't. But of course, if her people are, she is, right? So this ties in with the mother designating Greta, right, as what was the term? Country. I want to get the exact term. Country cute. Okay, so it shows he's very defensive about the idea that his wife Greta is considered less sophisticated, right? Country cute is demeaning. You say someone's country cute, it's not like you're city sophisticated. You're country cute, right? And then this whole thing with going to the Aran Isles is, of course, from Miss Ivor's perspective, it's to get closer to the country of Ireland, to fully understand Irish history, Irish culture, the Irish people. You need to not just, it needs to be more than just Dublin. You need to get in touch with the countryside as well. And this is telling us that is where Greta is from, which helps to explain why Gabriel's mother referred to her as country cute.
Yeah.
In a demeaning way. So it says something about Gabriel's relationship with his mother. Now, again, the importance of the mother is the mother is part of the past. The mother is part of the past that has a direct correlation to Gabriel's development. And of course, the mother is dead. So even in death, the mother is still impacting Gabriel. Okay, so that's important to remember, because as we know, when we get to the end, Michael is dead as well. Right? Greta is reminiscing. Greta is remembering his Michael after she hears that song. And Michael is still very much present, even though he's dead. So this comes back to what I was saying earlier about those distinctions, how the past is separate from the present. The dead are not part of the present. This is all hard to recognize that here. But when we get to the end, that's where it all comes together. That the dead are still very much alive. And of course, we have all this imagery with the paralysis and the routine, which is suggesting that those people in the present are not really that alive, right? They're again, mundane. Note the color brown. Remember Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Okay. Well, his name is Mr. Brown. It's not just willy-nilly. Hold on. I can't get this. Hold on. Something's. Does everyone see this live here, my iTunes thing?
Where? No, I cannot see.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah. Freddie Malins.
There we go.
The Morgan.
So you want to be attentive to like names as well. You can't get into it too much. Mr. Brown. Do you remember who Mr. Brown is?
Yes.
Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Have to go to the other one. Just too many things. Here we go. I did put Mr. Brown on. There we go. Mr. Brown, right? He's the only Protestant in the story.
The Protestant, okay.
Okay, while the rest of the people are kind of, it seems to be condescending towards other people. But note that, Mr. Brown is a legitimate name. And people name Mr. Brown, but it's also a color. And this idea of the color brown is clearly in reference to Mr. Brown as being a Protestant, which is associated with England, and England is dominating Ireland, right? Remember, they're still under imperialistic occupation to some degree, okay? So the idea of the color brown then takes on significance as a representation of England, all right, and how England has impacted very much, very strongly, Ireland. And the color that we associate with those two things is brown. Brown is not the most flattering color, right? And it suggests dirt. Okay, it suggests a lot of other things that are not flattering. All right. So again, how it works to a large extent in this case is related to the attitude towards Ireland under the influence of England, as being represented through the color brown, which is adding to this idea of stagnation, dirt, no culture, not going anywhere, right? And we have this brought out in relief when we see how Miss Ivors talks about it, right? Remember, she is the only one that seems to hold this position of, the need to really invest ourselves in Irish culture, the Irish language, and Irish nationalism, and Irish independence. No one else comes to her defense. No one else is agreeing with her. She's the only one who seems to still have a passion for movement forward. And that's further exemplified by the fact that she leaves the party. She can't stay in this milieu. She's an outcast because she's not willing to just roost in the mundane, routine, paralytic environment of this society. She's a rebel. And one of the reasons that she has this encounter with Gabriel, and she seems to be almost pleading with him to join her passion for things Irish. And I think much of that is related to their proximity to each other in terms of their backgrounds. She's looking at him saying, you're educated like I am, right? We do the same kind of work. We are, why are you not pursuing the Irish language and Irish culture and so on, which is what you should do because this is where you're from. She doesn't really try to grab anyone else. It's very much Gabriel, and I think that's related to their similarities, not the least of which is their education, perhaps their higher education than the rest of the people at the party. But of course, he, as we discussed last week, he very much rebels against that. And we get, right, this Irish is not my language, right? And I'm sick of my own country, right? He's provoked to a large extent into blurting that out. She's challenging him, she's pushing him, and finally he kind of lets it all out. Now it's important to remember this.
Even the name of Ivors, for Ivors, frankly is like suggesting to be like honest, to be like the person who tells you.
Oh, the name Ivors?
I'm talking about Ivors Frankly. I mean, talking about his surname or family name.
Her name is Molly Ivors, isn't it? Is it Molly?
No. His name is Ivors Frankly, right?
Who? Ivors Frankly?
Ivors Frankly is the full name. Her full name, right? Or not? Yes, it's in the we're in the book. It's in the book.
Oh, tell me what page.
Yeah, there. I'm looking at that part in down.
Hold on, let me get out of
where it starts, the part where it starts. Who is GC?
Um,
At the beginning,
yeah,
there, that page. Who is this she?
yeah.
Yeah. Then on the third part there, yeah, a little bit, a little bit. Well, I am ashamed of you, said Mr. Ivers frankly.
Okay, so frankly is it's not her name. Okay, uh,
It's not her last name.
no. Okay,
Ah,
frankly is it's kind of a verb, right? If I'm going to tell you something frankly,
okay. Frankly, like honestly, no,
yeah,
right?
but
Yeah, okay.
but but in
Okay.
fact, in fact, it does point out whether it's her name or not, and this is
Mm-hmm.
important, that she is being frank, right? What do we mean by frank?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be honest. I'm
Yeah.
going to be straightforward with you. So it does, even though it's not actually her name,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that she said, I'm ashamed of you, and she said it frankly, demonstrates her honesty. So even though it's not her name, your point is still the same. No, that's good. That's excellent. Okay, it shows that she is being honest, and that's another theme that is dealt with here. Is a lot of people are superficial, right?
Mm-hmm.
She is not. We see that Gabriel is very superficial,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't know how to deal with someone who is as frank and
Mm-hmm.
upfront and as
Mm-hmm.
honest as we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing Miss Iversby. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
that's actually quite helpful. It's a very good point, because Miss Ivers is a pivotal character in helping us understand Gabriel and understanding this society that is seemingly so paralyzed. Miss Ivers is not,
Mm-hmm.
all right? And she's very critical of either people who are just going round and round like the horse, which is most of the
Mm-hmm.
people at the party, or those like Gabriel, who also is critical of this round and round paralysis society. But Gabriel's way of coping with it or dealing with it, similarly to Miss Ivers, because they're both university educated and teachers, whereas Miss Ivers' idea is to go deep into Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
Gabriel's is to go outside of Ireland,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
France, Belgium, and perhaps Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's important to see how these two characters work together in terms of this attitude, and as making a very clear distinction between Miss Ivers' honest and frank approach to things and Gabriel's more superficial, and that superficiality that drives Gabriel's behavior all the way until the end of the story, okay, blinds him to a large extent. So it's important in this, while we're here, great, keep this up, because it allows me to do what I prefer to do than just lecture. We got to jump a little bit here. So I want to show you something. If we're looking at Gabriel as being superficial, unaware of his true self, right? He doesn't understand himself, and he certainly doesn't understand the people around him. He thinks he does, right? And that's where the epiphany at the end really comes into play, because he cannot get a full comprehension of where he stands vis-a-vis any of this material if he doesn't know himself, and he certainly can't know others. So the excursion to the Aran Islands, right, is to the west, right? It's west of Dublin, in the countryside. And very quickly, we have this little hint at the end. I hate jumping around without getting there, but at the same time, we've already been here for an hour. Well, I won't find it. I don't want to waste time trying to find it directly. But there's the hint after his epiphany. After all this that happens at the end, which we'll touch on in a minute, but I clearly won't be able to fully explore today, where there's a suggestion that maybe now he's ready to go out west. Maybe now which we get no definitive proof that this change that Gabriel goes through at the end is going to mean that he's going to become a radically different person. There's no indication at the end, despite his newfound awareness, that he's going to be a better husband, or that he is going to now do like Miss Ivors and embrace Irish nationalism and Irish culture. All we know is that he's changed. But there is the hint of this, the suggestion, okay, because it is a profound awareness that he has here. But again, to fully appreciate it, and I think we're getting closer and closer to that. Yes.
No, it's good.
Okay. Yeah, anyone else who wants to jump in here, please.
Please say something.
Yes. Yes.
No, I don't want to say something. I was saying that if anybody wants to say something.
Okay. And again, just to reiterate, right, what you pointed out. Whoops, that was the wrong button. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Again, just to, and I think it's great that you brought up the Frank, because I think it's really important. And it's not in my notes. I wasn't even going to bring it up, but we see here again, right? Frank-mannered, talkative young lady, referring to Miss Ivors, right? This frankness is very important because it really distinguishes her. She's not playing games. She's not being superficial. And not only is Gabriel superficial, most of the people are in this story. The thing with Gabriel is Gabriel doesn't think he's superficial. The others, we don't really get as much of an understanding of where they're coming from and who they are. But for the most part, they seem to be content with this paralysis and this mundane existence. We know Gabriel isn't. That's why he's so defensive. That's why he's so indignant towards Irish language and says he doesn't even like his country, and why he goes off to the continent all the time. Okay, he's not satisfied. We get, again, comes back to the galoshes, right? The galoshes, which have that double meaning in that, so far as it is something that protects from the snow, but is also something that comes from the continent. It's something that is alien to this society, but is very familiar in Europe. Across the English Channel, well, not just the English Channel, because they're in Ireland, over on the continent. All right? So he is always looking for that cultural and that understanding that on some level he realizes he does not fully have of himself, but most of the time he thinks he does. At the end, he realizes he doesn't. It comes back to his relationship with Greta. The importance of that epiphany is he has no idea who Greta is. It's his wife. They have children together. They've been together for a long time. But they are separate. Right? Is she wearing the galoshes at the beginning?
No.
No. Not, and is very, clearly ridiculing them to some extent, as are the other people. She seems to be more, in certain ways, more part of the rest of the characters and separate from Gabriel's self-consciousness. But of course, his relationship with her is very much predicated on her responding and doing what he expects her to. The way that he controls her. And his epiphany comes in large degree because he doesn't know her at all, and he thinks he does. So this whole story with Michael, he can't, at first, if you remember his sequence of reaction, he gets angry. And of course he gets jealous. It brings us back to the idea of jealousy as another theme. But ultimately what it leads to is his realization that I don't really know her. and I don't really love her because I don't have the kind of feelings for Greta that this guy Michael did. So he comes to realize that much of his whole existence is a bit of a sham, right? And that his relationships with others are superficial, that his understanding of others is not much of an understanding at all. And that his and that he can't understand others is due in large part because he doesn't understand himself. That's what that moment of epiphany is all about. They go hand in hand. To be able to understand others, to be able to understand Greta, right? And to be able to feel for Greta, and to be able to, you know, I mean, he never asked about how did Michael never come up if they've been married for so many years? Okay, and remember how the memory of Michael comes to Greta, right? Do you remember how that happens? It's another theme in the story that I haven't been emphasizing because it is very involved. All right, and I felt it's best for us not to delve too deep in it because it would have to be at the expense of so many of the other things. But is the music, right? Notice how prominent music is throughout this story. Okay, but in you know, for our purposes, given the limited amount of time we have to spend with the story, I can find it. I think it started the 3rd, right? So we get to let's talk a little bit before we run out of time. Don't worry, I'm going to be posting videos, right? And we will talk about this when we meet in 2 weeks, and we'll still have time to do Arabic, okay? Because we have those 2 classes. Arabic obviously won't take quite as much time, but where is here it is. I think. Okay. Okay. So this is an important, and I think this will really, especially for those of you who may not have finished the story as you're about to go to it. Are we going to? Okay, I have a question here. Are we going to have a choice? Right for the fun? Yes. The plan now is to give you a choice of questions, and I'll talk more about this next time we meet because that's probably when I'm going to give you the questions. But the questions are going to be a bit different. They're not going to be, the prompts are not going to be as detailed. You're going to have much more simple type of questions, which means you're going to have to do a little more work finding other things to substantiate the position and the direction you take. Okay, but you will have a choice. But I'll talk about it a bit once we finish here before we finish for the day. Okay. Hold on, let me see where it's. I want you to know when the shift, okay, to be aware of when this shift in Greta occurs, right? So here again, this is one of the areas where you really helps to be very attentive to how Joyce is writing this. Okay, so they're talking. It's after the party, and they're getting into the cabs, horse-drawn cabs at the time, right? Because this is right at the beginning of cars being introduced. So and they're outside trying to figure out who's going to go in what cab. There's not enough cabs and so on. It's an interesting engagement here, which I'll talk about in one of the videos, and the significance of Trinity College and so on. But the horse was whipped up, the cab rattled off amid a chorus of laughter and adieus. You know, a big part of what leads up to what I'm about to discuss is a demonstration of, again, this routine. They're talking about, yeah, every time we leave, and this is what happens every year, and this superficiality, the laughter, adieu, adieu, goodbye, oh, isn't this funny? You know, very little depth. And that's discussed right before this very important scene here. So if you have your books, if you can spot this, and you might be able to, let me just give you a page number because it's an important one, because it really starts the process that goes quite rapidly towards the end. Where is it? Yeah, this is one of the problems of doing it this way. Just good nights, good nights, good nights. Anyone spot it yet? It's got to be right around here. I do want you to be able to follow along here because it's okay. It's on page 226. All right, just you know, in any case, just mark it in your book somehow. Put a bookmark there, or put a little asterisk or something like that, because it's an important scene, because it really is where things are going to shift and start rapidly heading towards this, the most important encounter and exchange of the story, which is when Gabriel and Greta are alone. But this is before,
you said 226, right?
226. About a third way down the page, the paragraph that begins, Gabriel had not gone to the door with the others.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And remember, hopefully this is recording and I can put this up. It's so frustrating that it doesn't sometimes. Anyways, let's go through this. I know we're running out of time, but this is a good way to set up for the ending, which I will discuss in a video, but we will also discuss in class in 2 weeks. Okay, and when we come back for that class, you will have finished it, you will have looked at the videos, and we will have as long a discussion as necessary unpacking those final 2-3 pages, because they're very important and very dense. But here is where it begins. So after this scene, Gabriel had not gone to the door with the others. He was in a dark part of the hall. So again, we know, I'll do a little what I missed so much is the close reading, right? So it's a dark part of the hall, gazing up at the staircase. A woman was standing near the top of the first flight in the shadow. Remember, we've talked about shadows. So what does that suggest to us? It's dark, it's shadowy, not clear what's being seen, not clear what's being understood. Creates the tone, the atmosphere for this scene, right? Always remember those little clues that you're looking at when you're reading. He could not see her face, but he could see the terracotta and salmon pink panels of her skirt, which the shadow made appear black and white. It's an incredible line. It was his wife. Now,
yeah,
what strikes you about that? Because it's quite striking. We have the shadows, we have the dark. He sees a woman at the top of the stairs. He doesn't know it's his wife.
Yeah, that's what I think, that he started realizing about her, the characteristics of her wife, right?
But he doesn't recognize her at the beginning.
Yeah. That's
and then,
like,
what do we get? 4 or 5 lines down, it was his wife. Now, of course, we're readers of this. And about the way this is presented, it's meant to be, you know, through his perspective, that he's, who's that woman? Who is that? And then, oh, it's my wife. So what is that suggesting very strongly? Because of course we've seen Greta.
That he doesn't know his wife very well.
Exactly. That he doesn't know his wife very well. And the fact that this is introduced in this extraordinary little passage at this juncture of the story, because we've seen them together throughout, right? And they've been married for many years. It's not, but this is meant to surprise us, to some degree, maybe shock us. But it's telling us a lot. It tells us, yes, that he doesn't really know his wife. On the surface, it's just, well, it was dark. He just didn't recognize her. What's the big deal? Well, it becomes a big deal when we get to the end of the story. It becomes a big deal in the context of everything that we're reading here. Doesn't recognize her, it was his wife. It also suggests that his wife, even though it's dark and shadowy, there's something different about his wife. There's something, he can recognize his wife on a surface level, on a superficial level. But the fact that he can't recognize his wife here is not just saying that he's never really known his wife. In this particular moment, he doesn't recognize her. It suggests that something's different about her. That now, instead of her being what he is accustomed to, which is this fairly complacent and superficial person by his side that he's lived many years with, that something has transformed in this moment that makes her less recognizable. Something that's coming from within her, as opposed to what's on the surface. Note, this terracotta and salmon pink panels of her skirt are now just black and white. The surface, what is on the outside, which is salmon pink, her skirt, how she dresses, has become black and white. It's much less significant. The colors don't matter anymore because what she's wearing doesn't matter anymore. It's what is inside. It was his wife. She was leaning on the banisters listening to something. Gabriel was surprised by her stillness and strained his ears to listen also. She's on the staircase. She's hearing something. And whatever she's hearing is transforming her. And Gabriel, on some level, is picking up on it to the point where, what she's wearing, what's on the surface, what he knows of her and has known of her is not recognizable because now it's just in black and white. It's not in color anymore. But he could hear little, save the noise of laughter and dispute on the front steps. A few notes of a man's voice singing. He stood still in the gloom of the hall, tying into the dark and the shadows, trying to catch the air that the voice was singing and gazing up at his wife. And yes, when I put it in green, it means I'm trying to emphasize it even more than the yellow. There was grace and mystery in her attitude, as if she were a symbol of something. Okay, mystery. He is not recognizing her. He's not recognizing what is happening to her. And again, as we know from when she reveals what's happening to her here, it's by the music is conjuring up the memory of her past lover, Michael. And it's impacting her profoundly. And that's changing her because it's something that's coming from deep within her. It's something that is very much rooted in the past. Okay. And it is something, as we will come to find out, very much related to the dead. Okay. The title of the story. He asked himself, what is a woman standing on the stairs? Oops, I have to do this every time. Shadow listening to distant music, a symbol of. Okay, so he is not seeing her at this point as his wife or even as a person, as a symbol of what? again, we're seeing this from Gabriel's perspective. So he is trying to, it's like he's seen her for the first time. It's like whatever he's seen, he hasn't seen before. And given his education, his writing, and now we see this creative and artistic side of his culture, if you will, that if he were a painter, he would paint her in that attitude. Okay? Now again, when you first encountered this, it may not have made a big impact. It's meant to, but it's not, because it can't really be understood until we get to the end. That's why I'm bringing it up now, so those of you who haven't finished the end will be attentive to it when you get to the end. Those of you who have finished the story can reread from here on back in for next class. All right, and please do so before you watch whatever video I post next. The bronze against darkness, and the panels of his skirt would show off the light one. So now he has transforming her from his wife into an image that he would paint, a symbol that he would paint. Okay, it's bringing it into the realm of art. It's bringing Greta from the person she is into something that is much, maybe more is not the right term, but something that's different, something about her that he clearly has never seen before. And if he painted this picture of her, he would call it distant music. Okay, music, because obviously she's listening to the music. It also references the importance of music and musical structure throughout this story. Again, we don't have time to get into that in any depth. And distant, insofar as she is right now so distant from him. Okay? They go on and talk about what the song is. Note here, these are the words: oh, the rain falls on my heavy locks, and the dew wets my skin, my baby lies cold, and so on. It's right, ultimately, it's a song about death. Okay? But the singer of it, okay, can't finish it because he's got a cold. All right? Doesn't need to, right? Darcy, Mr. Darcy, okay? This is a moment, let me get this up here. Okay, so this is a moment of transition very much in the story. There's a number of these moments, not just the three parts and how they're broken up, but certain events that really shift things to some degree. Okay. We're almost finished here. Let me just get down here, just to wrap this up, and I will stop here just with Greta again. Make sure I got the right place. Mr. Darcy, he was the one who was singing, came from the pantry, fully swathed and buttoned, and in a repentant tone told them the history of his cold. Remember, that's why he can't finish the song. Everyone gave him advice and said it was a great pity and urged him to be very careful of his throat in the night air. Right? Mundane exchanges between the rest of the people. Gabriel watched his wife, who did not join in the conversation. The conversation is a continuation of this routine that is part of the party and part of all the other characters that Greta was participating on before. The only one who wasn't participating was Gabriel. If you go back to the dinner, when he gives a speech, he's withdrawn. He doesn't eat any of the brown pudding at the dinner table, while everyone else does. And of course, the only other person who's not participating is Miss Ivers, who left before the dinner. But now Greta does not join in the conversation. She was standing right under the dusty fanlight, and the flame of the gas lit up the rich bronze of her hair. Get the image, which he had seen her drying at the fire a few days before. Okay, this is starting. Note how Gabriel is seeing her now. Okay, it's a different way of seeing Greta. It becomes very erotic in the way that he starts seeing Greta from here right through to the end. She was in the same attitude and seemed the same attitude as she was on the stairs. This is having an impact on Gabriel and how he's reacting to her. It's as if, because he doesn't recognize her, there's something new about her, and this stimulates Gabriel because it's different and new. Okay, he doesn't understand its significance yet. That will not come until the end. Okay, at last she turned towards them, and Gabriel saw that there was color on her cheeks. She's flush. People get flushed for a variety of reasons, but sorry. People get flushed for a variety of reasons, but it's exemplifying that something is happening, and that her eyes were shining. Oh, when do eyes shine? Okay, well, shining, often they shine when they're moist, more moist than usual. Has she been crying? She's color in her cheeks, eyes shining. She's upset. What is it? We don't know at this point. Well, we do if we've finished the story. And clearly Gabriel doesn't know. But seeing her like this, and it is suggested that she's upset to some degree, a sudden tide of joy went leaping out of his heart. Okay? Mr. Darcy, she said, this is Greta, what is the name of that song you were singing? It's called The Lass of Aughrim, an Irish song. But I couldn't remember properly. Why? Do you know it? The Lass of Aughrim, she repeated. I couldn't think of the name. Okay? What is that telling us? She couldn't think. Sorry?
She doesn't want to say the name of the song or something like that?
Well, I think what it's telling us is she clearly recognized the song, and by recognizing it had a very...
She doesn't want to say it, right?
I think she genuinely couldn't remember the name.
Ah, okay.
And it's significant because it's a song from the past. And as we're going to find out, it's a song that Michael used to sing to her. Okay? Again, note the themes. The past, nostalgia for the past, the dead, okay? All, which again, at this stage we're going, we can't really pick up on that. It's only in retrospect when we come back to it. Okay? And this moment where she wants to remember the name, and she needs to be reminded what the name of the song is. The song has impacted her, color on her cheek and her eyes are shining. And the impact that has on Gabriel. Why is he joyful here? It's weird. But it's a profound moment. We know that by the way it's written, by the way it's described. Then we have, I would argue, quite humorous. And again, humorous in not the most flattering way, this exchange of everyone leaving. Good night. Good night. Good night again. Good night, all. Safe home. Good night. Good night. Good night, Greta. Good night, everyone. The mundane. The repetition. The horse going round and round. But it follows this. Okay? It's a contrast between the profound things that are happening here to Greta and Gabriel, and reminding us that it's in the context of this mundane, paralyzed, routine society that is represented through the Christmas party and the people there. Okay. We are at 11:30. We're, I think, pretty well set up to get to the end. A lot of things I haven't covered yet. I will touch on as many of them as I can in videos. But next time we meet, I would like for this class, because we only have 2 left, to really bring your questions or concerns regarding the story, right? When was asked, are you going to have a choice of questions for your final? Yes, but maybe not in the way that you think. So are you going to have a choice? You can either write about the dead or Araby? Probably not. You probably will not have a question where you only have to talk about Araby. You may have a choice of questions that deal with the dead on its own, or the dead in relation to Araby.
Okay.
And I hope
so we need to read now the Arabic, right?
You need to read Araby. Again, it's very short.
Uh-huh.
But whatever your choices are, it will involve the dead.
But we're going to write an essay, right? Similar to the midterm. You're going to like the questions.
It's going to be exactly like the midterm.
Oh, okay.
I will give you a question, except the question will not be the question I give you. Remember how the ones I gave you had a lot of information. I'm not going to give you as much information. It's going to be much more much more basic.
Okay.
Which means you're going to have to find that information that I gave you.
But when are you going to send that the questions? Because I would appreciate if you send us in advance.
You will have 2 weeks. So
great.
Yeah, it's going to be like the midterm. So worst case scenario, I would say you'll get the questions in 2 weeks at our next class, and then you will have 2 weeks from that day. So a week after our last class. I have to confirm that I can do that, but that's exam time. So I should be able to ask for you to give me your final drafts on that date. I just have to confirm that in terms of when I have to enter the final grades. If it has to come beforehand, I will give you the questions before then. But you will have 2 weeks from the time you receive the questions to when you have to give me your final draft.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Yeah.
Any other questions or concerns at this point regarding what we've covered today?
Not for me. Not. I don't think so.
Okay. Always remember. Oh yes, the exercises. Thank you for reminding me. I'm really struggling with figuring out how to do this. I'm not going to deny it. So you will, before our next class, all right, you will, so be attentive to Omnivox. I will be sending you an exercise to do. I'll give you probably at least 48 hours to do it. Okay? So, and what it's actually going to look like, I'm not sure, because I'm limited with what I can do because of this environment we're in. But don't worry about it. The plan is to make it easy, but also useful. So it could be something like we did in the past, which is grammar oriented. Or it may be asking you to write like a paragraph, very short, about something to do with the dead. Give me a quick summary, a quick description of a character, because that works. It allows you to be, again, attentive to the story, but then I get to, and what I'll be emphasizing is the writing. Okay, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to go, because I put together a number of issues that regarding your midterms, and I want to try to address them, but I can't give you the kind of in-class assignment that I did in the past that is multiple choice, because I just don't know how to do that in this environment. I may try, maybe give you something that's multiple choice and then have you just write down the corresponding A, B, C, or D and send it to me. But I don't know if that's really going to be the best and most productive thing to give you. But regardless, I'm mainly interested in the final essay. So I don't want you to fret too much about those in-class assignments, okay? That good? Did I explain it? And keep in mind, for your midterm, your grades will be posted either tonight or tomorrow at the very latest, depending on my access to the computer and Omnibox.
Okay.
Okay?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the essay results, I was being asked how they were. They were good for the most part. These are tough texts, and I took that into account. Okay? Yeah, I mean,
It was hard. It was hard. Too long story.
Listen, I very much am aware of not just the difficulty of Metamorphosis and Billy Budd and The Dead and Araby, but I'm also very much aware that things change because we're not in the classroom. Okay, and you know, you had, I hope, enough time with me in the classroom to understand that there's so much more I can do in the classroom. There's so much more that where I can recognize where there are issues and be able to really get so much deeper into the text, which I think would have been very helpful for you guys as well as me. I've taken into account that we were not able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so and keep in mind that one of the things that's vitally important to me, regardless of what kind of teaching is going on, is, and a couple of you have had me before, is I look for progress. Okay, very, very much look for progress. So we see how you transition from the midterm, now that we're getting more accustomed to this way of teaching, to see how you do with the final. Okay? But yeah.
So, you're gonna give us the result, our score today or tomorrow, but
yeah.
Are we gonna receive a feedback?
If you want the feedback, you need to contact me, because
okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, you know me. I have feedback. I've written down all the things. I can write it to you, or what I suggest, ideally always, is one-on-one, where I can go through with you as if we were sitting in a classroom. That's up to you. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, all you'll be receiving is the mark, and if you want feedback, just contact me, and that'll all be arranged.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Derek. Okay.
All good.
Good.
All right. So remember, no class next week. Look for more postings, videos for sure, maybe even another PowerPoint if I can get around to it. If you have any questions or concerns, as always, please just contact me. Okay?
Right.
All right, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks, if not sooner than that.